Is it that the perception and the reality is that it takes too long to get anything done? Is it that they have lack of visibility into what's going on? Do we have high levels of work and process with lots of context switching and just, again, all of the detriments that come from that?
Hi, this is your PM Cowboy coming back to you in 2026. I was just talking to my film crew about the crazy ideas of guests that I have set up for it, and I'm really excited about all the guests, and I'm particularly excited to kick off the year with Joshua Barnes. Joshua, welcome. Joshua Barnes will be covering the topic of Disciplined Agile. Don't worry, I'll shut up here in just a second. He has lots to say about Disciplined Agile. I want to pick up why the motivation to invite Joshua. We had the real privilege of having Mark and Scott, the two original founders of Disciplined Agile, on the podcast last year. The intent was to convey to all of you out there who feel that Agile has maybe fallen a little bit flat and maybe isn't adaptive enough, isn't agile enough for what you need in your organizations, that you should be looking at Disciplined Agile as a solution for this. Don't take my word for it. I'm gonna put these questions to Joshua and let him pitch it to you. But once again, I think the term that I used is I'm treating my guests as the executive Muppets who are sitting in the peanut gallery who are going to ask the difficult questions. And Joshua is the guy. He's directly at the source. He's the guy to tell you everything that you need to know about Disciplined Agile and maybe get you interested so that you can set yourself up for success in 2026. Okay? Good. So welcome, Joshua.
Great to be here, Mark.
What we do always at the beginning of every podcast is we let our guests kind of give a little bit of a background who they are.
Okay.
I'm always a big fan of this when I listen to podcasts because I can't stand listening to somebody unless I know what's their background so that I can have kind of an idea what perspective they're coming from. So you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up with Disciplined Agile?
Yeah. So I'm the founder of Process Mentors, and I've been working with Disciplined Agile since it came out in 2012. It was originally a product of IBM. But at that point, Disciplined Agile, the sort of the backbone of it was something called the Rational Unified Process. And I started working with that in the late 90s, right? So there's still a lot of unified process content.
Yeah, and there's a lot of guests who will be watching this who are familiar with the Rapid Unified Process, especially from SAP and companies like that.
Wonderful approach, great set of tools. That's where I first actually started working with Mark and Scott. So we've worked together for, greater than 2 decades. So quite a bit of time. And I'd say that from a experience perspective, I might be or one of definitely a few people that have had a continuous consulting engagement every year on Disciplined Agile since it came out in 2012. So my current engagement and how I'm not only working with organizations to use DA to deliver value better, but I do a fair amount of work from a consulting perspective with PMI. When DA was acquired in 2019 by the Project Management Institute, Mark and Scott's company and my company, we were partnered, and I was actually leading a very large-scale adoption of Disciplined Agile at a company called Diageo. So Diageo at the time was the biggest alcohol producer in the world. Big company.
Scott, I'm familiar. I used to work in hotel business, so I'm familiar with Diageo.
Yeah.
One of the biggest vendors of wines in the United States. They do all the European wines.
Yeah. So large company. Scott had got a adoption of DA going, and I took it over for him. So when PMI acquired their company, that consulting engagement had continued. So I've had a very interesting and a long-standing business relationship with PMI from a DA perspective. And then over the years, especially after Mark and Scott left, they've engaged me to help sort of continue the good work that they had done and sort of build the next generation of DA, which brings us up to the current point in time.
I want to give a shout out to Mark and Scott as well, because this is what I really loved about our conversation when I addressed the subject. Well, we had this conversation before we started the podcast. I said, the quality of initiatives at PMI is like in all organizations, kind of contingent on the human aspect, who's driving it, who's behind it, who's got passion. And I think a lot of the people who have fallen in love with Disciplined Agile were kind of concerned when Scott and Mark left. And I addressed this with them, and they said, "Don't worry, it's in great hands." And you were the first person they mentioned, so they had good things to say about you, and that's why I reached out to you. And I want to say thank you to you for responding so quickly.
Oh yeah, and I also want to bring up two other names, right? So Curtis Hibbs. So Curtis Hibbs is an Agile thought leader at PMI, and he is sort of my partner. I mean, I really work for him, and Christy Muller, who's the product owner and product manager.
That's important to know. That's a name that everybody needs to know, right?
Yeah. Christy and Curtis. So they're the leadership from a DA perspective that are the employees of PMI, and I've had the great privilege to work with them and build a lot of the new content that we're seeing.
We originally had talked about maybe doing a four-way conversation, but you and I decided it might be easier to follow the content if we don't have four people talking at once.
Yes, yeah, no, this format that can be a bit of a challenge.
We kind of put together a loose framework of questions, and I'm sure we're going to go off script as we always do. But let's. We try to cater to managers and leaders out there who are trying to get things done. There's kind of the systematic approach to things, and there's a systemic approach to things. There's hard skills and soft skills, and there's all different things. And I don't think one contradicts the other. I think it's really important to have both process and people aligned. And DA looks at execution partly from a systemic perspective, but also very strongly from a systematic perspective, from a tool perspective, from a process perspective. But let me ask you a typical stupid question that maybe a lot of executives might have come up right away without daring to say it. For those people who are watching this podcast and say, "Okay, I'm listening, but what the heck is this Disciplined Agile?" What would be a succinct way to tell them what is DA principally? What's the motivation behind it? What problems does it solve?
Yeah, so primarily DA is a knowledge base, and it contains agile and lean and value stream management practices that have been curated, and currently within the knowledge base there's over 2,000 of them. So it's a very rich knowledge base. And what makes it a bit unique is that it's not a prescriptive framework. It does not have you have to do this, and there's not a guide that's going to be the sort of the standard that you do this and you're going to be doing that approach. What also makes it unique is that it covers the end-to-end flow. And that's a lot of the content we've been working on. So I've got an approach that's called end-to-end flow that we've brought a lot of that content now into Disciplined Agile. And it's about delivering value more effectively. We're starting to see a lot of interest in enterprise agility, right? We see PMI has taken leadership in trying to create not trying, but they have created an enterprise agility manifesto. And it's more about bridging executive leadership and practitioners. Right. And what's important about DA is DA supports enterprise agility, and it's very strong in value stream management. And specifically, value stream management's been around for close to 100 years, right? And it's very common in the physical world, the manufacturing world. But companies from a digital product perspective have long since not had the same benefit of looking at things from an end-to-end flow perspective, and DA is very strong with that. So what executives and what leadership, and for all of you out there that want to bring something that potentially can have tremendous impact at your organization, is the end-to-end flow, and I'll show some visuals later as we get into this, but there is a strategic side. It's how we're making investment decisions, how we're packaging that work, how we're looking at not overflowing in, work in process and doing things that aren't as valuable and the fire drills we're currently seeing. And then there's the tactical side of the flow, which is where we get team level agility, right? And the thing that is in both sides of that is we've introduced a continuum where from a team Agile perspective, we've got predictive on one side and Agile not all the way at the other end, because they got lean and you have flow. And there are approaches. There's the Agile Lifecycle NDA, there's continuous delivery, Agile NDA, but everything in between that is a hybrid. And we have some ways now to show what common hybrids look like. So it recognizes that let's face it, most teams at most organizations, if they're doing Agile, they're really doing something that's more of a hybrid than like what we'd consider by the strict definition of Agile, to meet that.
I would even go further. If I love what you're saying, but I'm gonna kind of call this back to you to see if I'm understanding you in the correct terms. Because some people who might be listening might say, what does he mean with end-to-end? I feel you when you say that, and I'll tell you what I'm hearing. I think the big issue that you kind of addressed with the concept, I think every organization kind of has in its mission statement recently, agility is important, okay? In a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, if we're going to use another bingo word there, VUCA, right? The only way to get where you need to be going is to be agile in your approach to achieving them. But I would say most executives, when they say the word agile, it's more an emotion and less a systematic understanding of a process. And I'm going to go one step further. I don't think most executives really understand what the heck a project is at its core. They see it as a special initiative, but they don't separate project management from what their core business is, which is production and making money. And especially when projects say, going to deliver value, projects don't deliver value until they're done. And when you're talking about end-to-end, and I love this perspective because it's if we look at I'll hold it up to the camera. If we look at this book right here, one of the key things that I pointed out with Mark and Scott, which I loved, was this concept is, and a lot of my clients say this, okay? SAP is famous for saying this. They'll say things like, the beginning of the next project is the end of the last one. It's a continuous flow, right? So you talked about lean. Lean is not that's not a temporary thing. It's an ongoing thing. You talked about value stream, which is not a one-time thing. It's a continuous thing. And I think, and this is what executives are kind of telling us in those of us who are project fanatics, we have this beginning-end mind frame. Yes, we endorse agility, but agility has to be more than just a temporary thing, and it has to have a holistic perspective on the organization. And yeah, you guys can do your projects and, you can live in your own clan, tribe, or whatever you might have and do whatever tools you do. But at the end of the day, it has to fit into the big picture, which brings me to the next topic, which I think most organizations are really hoping for, is this real portfolio perspective, because I find far too few companies really have a true, profound portfolio perspective, and you kind of addressed it with this 3-tier. There's a strategic perspective to what we're doing, right? There's a tactical perspective on business unit level or department level, and there's an operational. And I think far too many project managers in the past have kind of focused on that operational quality of project management. And if we want to be agile as an organization, we have to integrate all three. So does that kind of resonate with what you said?
Yeah, it does. And to just kind of, because this will probably be important for a lot of what we'll continue to discuss, to build sort of a mental model that we all have from this end-to-end flow perspective. It's when we've got an idea that comes through from a business stakeholder, a request from a customer, right? And how that idea goes from, yep, this is something we might want to do, to delivering value. And I think that what we've seen a lot in the Agile space is, for one, it's like checkbox Agile. It's like, well, we want to just, follow an adoption roadmap. We're going to deliver, a whole bunch of training, and, everybody's going to be doing Agile.
And there's 50 different certifications that you all can get.
Yeah, so we'll get into I'm sure we'll get into certifications, some of your questions. But then it's not about just delivering a project or delivering the next increment of work that we've done. It's that it's valuable, right? And that could be something that's customer facing value. It's new functionality that customers want, or to keep up with a competitor. It could be value in the form of, well, we're going to do something because we're in a regulated industry and it's going to keep us in compliance. It could be from a technical enablement standpoint. It's like, yeah, we've made some decisions and we've taken some shortcuts over the years, and we have this process debt and technical debt and all these other forms of debt. And we need to get ourselves out of this situation. So it's taking a look at value delivery, and whether that's using some agile practices, it's using some value stream management practices. What's important is we're delivering value better, and the organization is better off for it.
So what you're basically saying with the value stream is, I've been preaching this for years, some of the most important things in a project happen before a project and definitely after a project. And if you don't have the big picture, you're missing out.
Yeah. And so as we get into a little bit more on portfolio management, some of the things that we have in DA now that are just a very, very good option for companies to explore is taking a look at that portfolio backlog, right? So teams that have used Agile have used a work item type. Typically it's going to be stories, right? User stories and technical stories, and we'll have that in a product backlog, and that enables a lot of flexibility. And it also enables a progressive level of depth, right? We're not going to front load doing a bunch of work on requirements or things that maybe we're going to do, maybe we're not going to do, maybe they're going to change based on a little bit of the learning we're going to have. We're always just taking a look at the near term, relative near term, right? And making sure that work has sufficient clarity and we understand what we're doing and how we're going to then be able to, implement it. We don't see that in the upstream. We don't see that in the investment decision space, which is portfolio management. So to do that, we have to have a very similar approach to increments. And what we've introduced are value increments and innovation increments. Those are similar in a lot of ways to a project, but the difference is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify discrete value that can be done. We can get feedback on it. We can get it released. And we understand all that it takes to do that, right? If you think about most projects, right, and so some of what I've got in the Disciplined Agile leadership course and some of the other content that I'll maybe touch on today, is it's kind of, and this is a technique that goes back to a federal agency here in the U.S. that I spent many years working with. And it was about taking a look at what they have historically been doing. And if you take a look at a lot of projects, especially for organizations that go through like an annual budgeting and funding approach where you've got business cases or project charters or some mechanism to say, these are all the things that are up for competition and are going to be evaluated. And, if you're on a 12/31 calendar year end, you're typically going to see that in the October, time frame. And we're going to go through this event where we're going to make decisions of what we're doing in the next year. So stakeholders, for one, they typically want the same budget they had last year, if not more. And we're going to see projects that, yes, it might be for a particular product, and I'll talk from a digital product perspective, but it'll be like lots of different functionality aggregated together. There might be some stuff, Mark, as a customer that you would want to be using. I might be internal to the organization, and I've got a role where it's things that I want to do that is going to help us maybe sell more or be more, whatever more effective. But it's all commingled into this big project. So what we try to do is try to say, let's identify discrete increments of value in a scope like that. And oftentimes,
which means you're bringing into play, and maybe this leads kind of into my next question. But before we get to the question, I think one of the statements that's in the question I was going to ask is from my feeling, Agile is still here, but I think it's against the ropes. I think it's falling flat. I think it's in a stage that AI will be in about 2 years when people are kind of exhausted and disappointed in the hype not living up to the expectations, maybe because the hype was so ambiguous. I think one of the big challenges with Agile, and I think this is where DA offers a legitimate solution, is I think most Agile trainings, as you refer to, focused kind of on an operational micro level. Yeah. We're going to talk about ceremonies, we're going to talk about roles, which is wonderful. I mean, you need your core team to be doing that. But as we all know, a system requires integration at all levels. And if senior management doesn't know what their tactical responsibility is, and your executive management doesn't know what the strategic orientation is, if there's not what you talked about, kind of a program perspective, and value stream begins long before the because I'm going to be very blunt. No CEO, no board member could give a hoot about what's being trained in Agile on a micro level.
Agree.
They're like, they're saying, please leave me alone. Backlog, okay. Can we talk about what's relevant to my daily function? And I think that's missing. And I think if we're gonna kind of do a sales pitch for Disciplined Agile, I think Disciplined Agile is the first Agile approach, and it's more than an Agile approach, that kind of breaks those boundaries and say, listen, this is something that has to be discussed at multiple levels, but also at a higher level. Would you agree? Is that kind of a good summation of what DAA has to offer?
Yeah, I do agree. And the thing, especially at the executive level or the leadership level, is understanding what's important at that higher level perspective. You're right. They don't care, and they shouldn't care about team level Agile at the micro
sprints
level.
Or story points.
But is it that the perception and the reality is that it takes too long to get anything done? Is it that they have lack of visibility into what's going on? Do we have high levels of work and process with lots of context switching and just, again, all of the detriments that come from that, right? So we have some factors. We've got 7 factors that we typically start with at that higher level when we're looking at what types of improvements do you want to make? And then from that, it's taking a look at, I'll give you an example. If we were going to take a team that is already a team, right? We're not just forming a new team, right? And we're saying, okay, we're going to train you and have you use a new Agile way of working. Now, you see things that have been around forever. It's like, oh, you can get 400% improvement or 4,000% improvement. If you're getting that big of an improvement, you probably got some other challenges with your team, right? So let's just say, you've got a team.
Something's definitely gone awry, yeah.
Something's definitely gone wrong, right? So at the team level and their effectiveness in doing whatever it is that they're supposed to be doing, let's say you get 25% improvement, which would be pretty significant. I mean, if I were a manager or I was an executive at a large company, I'd be like, that's pretty good. Now, take a look at the work that they're doing. Again, the size of the scope, the project or whatever the construct might be. If we were to cut that in half so that they were able to do the first part and then the second part, assuming the second part we're still worthy of doing. Now, would that increase time to market and get feedback quicker than maybe a team level improvement from a way of working? Yeah. And so it's looking up front is where so many of the opportunities lie for improvements.
I'm gonna put it in a different way because this resonates with me also in my consulting experience. I think we're always focused on the wrong efficiencies. I mean, I think there's plenty of potential also on an operational level, but I think the frustration on an operational level is they're like, if I don't get tactical support, I'm waiting. And my number one kind of constructively subversive statement I make, most projects don't fail to be in time and in budget because of the work that needs to be done. They fail to be in time and in budget because there's no integration with a tactical level. People don't know what decisions need to be made. They're uncertain of what the solution should be. And that's not just on a tactical level, but that's on a strategic level. And that failure to integrate, and you must integrate, because I'm sorry, project teams only have, their pay grade is too low to be making some of the executive decisions, right? They don't have the information. And until we find, and if we're talking about value stream, we're not just talking about value stream, we're talking about decision stream as well, information stream,
Yeah, you're bringing up integration is a great little segue into talking a little bit more also about how we're able to use some of the great things in DA that really differentiates it from other approaches that are very common in the marketplace. So let's think about like a consumer product goods company, a reseller, right? And so I've worked with a lot of financial institutions. I've worked with a lot of consumer product goods company, and there's some similarities. So if you think about, and I'm going to use one very recent organization that I had a long-standing engagement with. So initially, they were looking at DA from a team agile perspective, right? The book that you held up, Choose Your Way of Working, few people had read that, and they had a lot of interest in seeing how DA potentially could solve some of the challenges that they've had. And so, the initial engagement kicks off, and what I had done was I said, well, let's focus on team level agile, but let me also show you some of the other things as I come across them that might be worthy of spending time on. So they've got a sales portal, right? Yeah, common these days, common for a long time. But they also had an app, right? So they have an iOS app version, and then they had an Android version. And so anytime they were making a change, or not anytime, but most of the time, if they were making a change to the sales portal, then the teams that were doing app development also had to make changes, right? Because you're not going to see different functionality on the app, or it's going to work different. But they also had back-end platforms, right? So there were platform teams. And so any quantity of work in this sort of situation I'm describing were multiple separate projects. So there was a lot of dependency management, and there was a lot of interruption. So everything had to be built with the mindset of having a feature toggle, right? So improving team level agile would have gotten them a little bit, but saying we need to be taking a look at how we are scoping work, which again, a value increment there's multiple levels of this strategy, but what it entails is saying, if this work requires the portal team, the app teams, and this other back-end team or teams to do something where something can be released and consumed by their customers, which is where the value is at, then that needs to be treated as an increment, not a bunch of separate projects. Because again, the complexity of all of this is what just drags us down. And then we know that there's always interruptions, there's maintenance work that sometimes needs to come up, which just compounds the situation. So those are the techniques that really, if you improve team level performance, are they just more effective at doing something that's not very valuable? Yeah, sometimes, if not a lot of times.
And I think you're correct, because the responsibility of the value stream is not just based on what the team does on an operational level. It's equally as important to include the tactical and the strategic level.
Yeah, and then getting kind of beyond that. So when we get into some of these strategies, then we start thinking about, okay, well, do you use shared services in your organization? Oh, well, there's probably a lot of interaction and horse trading or negotiation to be able to get that done. And is marketing going to be involved? Like, do you need marketing to have some sort of and legal's got to review something. So now you have supporting areas in the organization that have some quantity of work before you can get this thing consumable, right? And then is there an impact from an operational perspective? Right? That this place had hundreds of branch locations, just like financial institutions, right? Banks. Right? So is there an impact there? And those are all of the things that when we're looking at value stream management, we're looking at that end-to-end flow. It is not just the little important part that a delivery team is doing, or delivery teams.
We kind of have the benefit that we have a master of the trade, you, and a quick learner and easy to an easily excitable project professional on the other side. But we're here to kind of not just have a conversation where we're having fun. We're also here to kind of open up the subject matter to other people who want to know what it's about. My suggestion is, I think the two best ways to understand something is to kind of understand what the problem is or what the potential is, some of the philosophy behind it. But maybe we can go over to using two techniques to make this clear to people who are listening. And number one is to kind of wrap it in a storyline. So maybe if you can talk us through, if it's Diageo or another client, where do you begin as a consultant with DA? What does the client need to know? What is the process? And then the second factor, which is hugely important, and I picked up the statistic, I think, a year ago, and I was fascinated by it. It seemed obvious when I read it. And the statement was that from learning psychology, if you have vision, 90% of what you think you know comes through your eyes. And you've prepared a bunch of visuals. Maybe if you can talk us through a client scenario from beginning to end, and then kind of link it to some of the visual tools and processes from DA, I think this might open some of the people's eyes and ears that are watching us.
I think that sounds great. I'm going to need to get my supervisor, which is my cat. Here's my there's my kitty cat.
She's cute.
I'm going to put her in her little...
My supervisor, we've locked in the other room. It's my dog.
Yeah, let me get this up, and let me just get my visuals up, and I'll share my screen in just a moment. I have them all ready to go, but they're in MIRO, and some of these take a fair amount of time to. That should be good. All right. So, where I'm going to start off, and let me know if you can see my screen. Yep. All right. Let me make this a little bigger here. I'm gonna cover so for all of you out there that are watching this. Right. I'm going to cover content. I'm going to try to be very explicit about what you'll be able to find within Disciplined Agile content from a PMI perspective. And then I'm also going to be covering some content that is the intellectual property of my consulting company. It's we saw last year there were some of these like Scrum expansion packs, I think they were called. So I kind of think of it like that. It's things that maybe PMI will work in as the work that I've done with them to work into it a little bit more. But I'll try to be clear with that. So what I'm showing you here to just kind of begin with, and this is the typical starting point from a conversation about sort of pitching DA at an organization. If they've got some interest in it, somebody's, got some cursory knowledge of DA. And this is the latest version of this end-to-end flow perspective. And there is
let me just jump in here, and I have to smile because one of the things that PMI and similar organizations do is to create simplicity of a complex subject is we like to put it into an approximate time frame, and we like to segment it, which is kind of also an agile approach, right? And we like to call it a life cycle, which gives us, this is what I was talking about, that kind of visualization where people can kind of look at it and then kind of through the visualization understand, hey, this is the process.
Yeah, and what this is intended to be able to show, and this is going to be at least somewhat common for most organizations, is that if you've got this space here, right? So you've got an idea, you've got a request, you've got, again, something that you want to do next. How does that go from this to being something that's consumable value, whether it's, new revenue, it's just improving the customer experience, it's again, value from a compliance perspective. Let me get the kind of the zoom correct. Yeah. So what we're trying to take a look at is this area is what does this go through? And if we go through most organizations again that have like this annual budgeting and planning event, right? We could kind of map that out. What this is showing is that if we use a similar approach to what we found that works very effectively from a team agile perspective in this space, right? Then what we're doing is we're able to build a backlog that we're able to manage of these investment decisions and have a lot of flexibility from what are we going to be doing next? And if we're always focused on doing sort of the smallest thing we can do that provides value, sort of that minimum, then again, we've got opportunities to make changes as we're seeing the work flow through. So we look at portfolio management, we look at product management, and we look at the discovery workflow. So think about it like this. And let me go ahead and move to
before you go on. Can you go back, because I'm smiling a little bit because I love the stuff that happens before the idea, because I think that's one of the things that's often overlooked in organizations. An organization cannot be agile if only the operational team is agile. So there needs to be an understanding of responsibility and rolemanship, okay? What do I as an executive have to do on an organizational level? How do I create enterprise agility before I get to the more formal form of portfolio management? Are you gonna cover that at a later stage, or do you want to say something about that now?
Yeah, so I am. So I'll tell you what. Let me do this. Let me just high level cover this.
Sure, great.
And then I'm going to show you once this is. So we're still kind of talking about introducing this to an organization, talking with some of the decision makers to get them to understand this relatively quickly. So what this does is it shows that we've got a way to be able to bring ideas and requests much more efficiently into the work stream. We've got the things that we would want to be doing in the near term. And from a near term perspective, now we're looking at things that maybe we're going to be doing like a quarterly value delivery planning event. Like we've got some work that's in process. We've got some capacity that's going to be freeing up. What are the next things that we can do? And that's a big part of value stream management is taking a look at these are the things we want to do, but we have to have the capacity to do that. If this thing is the most important thing or most valuable thing we feel we can do, but we don't have the people that, and all the people that can get the work done so that we can release and get something that's, again, consumable. Well, should we look to the next most valuable thing or the next most valuable thing until we can match that capacity up? Otherwise, we have growing levels of WIP, and now it's taking longer to get anything done. We have an intake queue. So this is sort of like if we were looking at team level Agile, and we're looking at going, we have a product backlog and we're going to go through like sprint planning or iteration planning. What we're looking at is the top part of that backlog are the candidates that we're potentially going to commit to doing in that next time period. It's the same thing here, just at a higher level. This holding area, this intake management is the top part of our portfolio backlog that meets a definition of ready. We've got adequate understanding and we're ready to then, again, go through planning and then bring it through the rest of this. Now, showing this is one component. Another one, and I'm going to go to over here, and I am going to...
this is a small document.
Yeah, I'm going to zoom in. So these are all different visual diagnostics, and I just need to make sure I've got I'm going to have to open a couple of these boards up because I'm going to kind of go back and forth. So you'll have to edit some of this out. I've got to open a couple of boards up, and maybe I'll start with this one. Yeah, no. So Mark, just so you know, what I'm showing, like all of these different boards, right? So these all are techniques to be able to, for instance, this is identifying drag, and it's looking at things like push
and
work, hidden work.
These would be some of the tools that you refer to in the database or in the compendium of what PMI's Disciplined Agile ultimately also offers its members, right?
They could. This right here is all of this is all of the content of what I call end-to-end flow. So this is all of the content. The graphic that I was showing, that particular graphic has been introduced to the new DA leadership course. But I'm looking for one board in particular, and I probably am not in the right area. So just give me 1 second and then we can kind of pick back up. I just need to get these boards open. And okay, what I'll do is I'll start with this. Okay, so you ready to kind of pick back up? Yeah, so some of the conversations then with executives, and this would be done at a high level, but I am showing that this is one of the assessment tools that we have. This is called end-to-end value flow. And yeah, there's instructions. I mean, this is all, a little bit of training, but what we're looking to do, and this is something that originally was part of the Disciplined Agile Value Stream Consultant certification course from PMI, is being able to take a look at some of the competencies. Now, there's a lot on here, and this is some of the discovery we would be doing with executives to say, take some of this stuff off. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people involved with being able to go through and use identifiers, right? That, we're doing this really well. We do it, but we don't do it very good, or we've never done this, or we've stopped doing it.
The KISS approach, right? Keep, increase, start, stop, kind of a little bit too.
Yeah, exactly. So it might be having them take a look at this. It might be going to something we call your biggest pain points, which this particular template, which I'm just going to zoom in on a little bit of the instructions here, is one of the most effective tools for identifying pain points and getting some additional information that I've used. This was one that is part of the Disciplined Agile Foundations and the Disciplined Agile Leadership course. This is available in the MIROverse. A little bit later in our discussion, I'll show some of the templates that I've, MIRO board templates that are now available in the MIROverse. But part of what the discussion with executives typically is that we need to understand, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to do from a higher level than team agile perspective? Again, is it that we're really struggling with being able to get anything started and released in an adequate time frame, which means you don't have enterprise agility, right? You're not able to pivot quickly. You're not able to take a look at, well, yes, we've got capacity that'll be freeing up in sort of the nearer term that we could do something else. So it's taking a look at those larger things, and then from that, out of this large knowledge base of Disciplined Agile, picking the strategies, the practices, the techniques that would then potentially support being able to make progress there. So that's some of what we do from let me get back to the end-to-end flow perspective. Now, what I'll show next is there's two significant value offerings that DA has to organizations. One, which it has been very strong for a very long time. It just, again, it's kind of not as well known as some of the other approaches, is team level agility. I mean, that's where DA started. It started about, looking at things from a team perspective. And a lot of what we'll find in the assets that are available from a DA perspective are team focused. Now, there is value stream management content, there is enterprise agility content that's in there as well. But that's the most robust. So I'll take you through an example to show what DA has to offer from that perspective. And then I'll come back and I'll show you what's even more exciting, which is over here in this, just so that people watching this are going to be able to understand the balance between the two perspectives. And I do find it sometimes it's a little bit easier to talk about some of the team agile content. So this is going to be for a combination of some things that are currently available to anybody that is out in the MIROverse, and then some additional content. So this team agility canvas, it starts off by showing this. So one of the things that's been let me get this all on here for just a second. So one of the things that's been well, there's a few challenges historically with DA, right? As valuable as the content is and the knowledge base that's out there, it's not a prescriptive approach, meaning we're not going to say, here is your guide for doing the agile life cycle, which is for larger quantities of work, or for continuous delivery agile, which would be for maintenance teams or organizations that have got to a point where they can do a bit of work, run a sprint, run an iteration, and make a release into production. And so what we introduced last year as part of the Disciplined Agile Foundations course is this ways of working spectrum. And this is, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that if we've got sort of the predictive or traditional or whatever we want to call it at this end, and agile is over here. Again, it's not quite to the end, right? So we've got those two sort of poles at both ends of this spectrum. Then everything in between is hybrid, right? The problem, the challenge has always been, though, that we're going to teach the certification courses and a lot of the previous courses in DA have taught you how to use the knowledge base. And then you need to go and figure out what is going to be best for your way of working. And depending on who you have in the organization, that could work. But we have found for a good period of time that people struggled with that. for those of you that haven't had experience to DA before, it's a little bit like saying, I'm going to invite you over to my house and I'm going to show you around my kitchen, right? So I'm going to give you a description of some of the equipment that I've got. I'm going to show you my pantry. I'll show you what's in my refrigerator. And then I'm going to ask you to create a couple of meals, right? I'm not going to give you a recipe. You're going to figure out, now I'm going to tell you maybe what a spice tastes like. I'm going to tell you what this piece of equipment, this is what a blender does, right? And it's a bit of a challenge. So what we did starting in last year, starting in the Disciplined Agile Foundations course, is that we have what are called quick starts. So again, the consulting work that I've done that goes, well, back to the origins of DA. Somebody might, like Mark might say, hey, we're going to bring you into our organization. We understand, you're an experienced Disciplined Agile expert. We don't want to figure out how to use the Agile life cycle. What we want is, can't you just tell us, right? And so there's always been this, well, we don't want to be prescriptive. So we've, created these quick starts, and I'll show that along with this.
If I can just pick up on there, I think what's really great on what you've told us, this kind of goes back to, I think the reference model that everybody uses is the Ralph Stacey model, where he talks about, a project execution is actually a spectrum. Actually, it goes not just from, execution of anything is a spectrum. From the line organization to classical project management to hybrid models to more pure agile versions, maybe to Kanban, and then you have the last stage, which is I love what Ralph Stacey refers to as the house of pain or the red zone where nobody goes. I think that's a good reference to the fact is that every organization is a complex system that has a multitude of different projects that are all over the spectrum. And I think if we're going to have a hybrid, and I think hybrid, anybody that I talk to who's professional in project management really doesn't care one way or the other what we call it. The question is, how are we getting it done? And I like your analogy of the cooking, is because you can get a hearty, healthy, satiating meal in many different ways, and in reality, from a operational perspective, as long as I'm getting what I need, who cares how you prepared it, right?
Yeah. And, and then it's, as you'll see as I get into the what the quick starts actually show you is that they're representative starting points. Again, it's not a prescription. It's, you are going to take a look at these practices and make a determination with some additional content to know, is this something that is going to be valuable potentially to you in getting your work done? And is it something you're actually going to be able to do?
I will put one caveat up though, and this comes from my training experience. I think on an operational level, when you initiate anything of this sort, there will be novices who desire a semi-prescriptive approach. Maybe it refers to what you're talking. It's a paradox. Yeah, you don't want to tell them, you can't dictate exactly what every step is, but you want to kind of give them a loose framework in which with which they can identify themselves and say, okay, but at least give me a basic framework with which to work in, right?
And that has been one of the biggest challenges from a DA perspective, because if you have not used an Agile approach before, or you've been somewhere and you were told you were using Agile, but it was like, man, that wasn't, like, what we did wasn't very good, Well, so then you don't know where to start. And that's what I'm going to show you. That's what these quick starts provide. So one other thing that I will pull up is there are two major components that PMI has made available from a DA knowledge base perspective. And I'm going to quickly show both of them, because I'm going to show some of the things that we've now really improved upon how you get to this information. This is the DA browser. And the DA browser is a freely available online tool that anybody can go to. And
right now?
Right now.
On PMI. Do we have a link up there?
I do. Here's the link. I'll put the link. Well, so let me move this for a second.
All these treasures DAB, that nobody knows about.
Yeah, so that's one of the big problems with DA is nobody knows this stuff's here. So dab.pmi.org, which is very small, but it is right here on my screen, dab.pmi.org. This is the Disciplined Agile browser. That's what DAB stands for. And the browser is where we're going to find practices that are from Agile, from Lean, from predictive, from value stream management. And again, there's over 2,000 practices.
See, this is the visualization I was talking about, because anybody who kind of looks at this is kind of like a mind map or a work breakdown structure. You see the different phases, and then you see the different
mind maps. Exactly. And let me show you how. So over on the left-hand side, how they are arranged, and I'm going to just shrink this for just a second, right, is Disciplined Agile delivery is all the team level stuff. And then we've got content from a DevOps perspective. We've got things from an enterprise perspective and things from a value stream perspective, right? Again, they're kind of alphabetical. So, I mean, value stream should be, these should be flip-flopped, but nonetheless, right? And each one of these, and I'm gonna click on Explore Scope in the inception phase, right? Because this is where we find practices that are not all, but a lot of them that are in the requirement space. So this mind mapper, this is called a process goal, is really just a container of practices, and there's decision points like how are we going to explore scope, how are we going to explore usage, how are we going to explore the domain. And what you can do is you can click on one. So I'm going to go, let me see user story. It'll give me a brief description. It'll give me some trade-offs. And then for a lot of these, we can go underneath resources, and there are links to vetted content that are either, something you're going to find out in the industry, user stories applied for, agile software development, or something within the PMI ecosystem. So this is sort of one of the things that we have. There's great benefit here, and PMI has made this available to anybody for free. Originally, it was going to be for PMI members. And then it was like, well, anybody that took a DA course will have access. And then it was just like, no, they just made it years ago free to everybody. And so DA does have, so there are life cycles within DA. There's an Agile life cycle and a Lean life cycle. And those are the ones that are more geared for larger quantities of work, something that's like a project or a value increment. Right. And so we've got the inception phase, construction phase, and transition phase, and then ongoing. And again, ongoing, you're going to see things like metrics and intake work and addressing risk. It's just, again, because of the way these things are laid out, ongoing really could be like, around all of this. But again, this is kind of a,
No, this is great that you're showing. This is what I was talking about, that visualization, because I'm sure there's a bunch of people, and I hope I'm going to be doing this after this podcast, is to go on here and just kind of fiddle with it, right? And see, push a couple buttons and see what happens. And a lot of the cognitive, assimilation of content that has to happen is between you and the content. You need to take time and kind of assimilate it and kind of translate it and then put it into a logical framework that works for you. And this is great. Thanks for sharing this.
And I'm going to come back to the other part of the knowledge base, which is here. This is what's called a microsite within PMI, and there's lots of content that I can get to here. But I want to show that this has been around since really sort of pre-PMI's acquisition of DA. This originally was a tool that was built so that Mark and Scott and their employees pre-acquisition had a way to manage these process goals and be able to publish them quicker. And the book that you held up, Choose Your Way of Working, really was superseded when this was made available to everyone. So the big Choose Your Wow book, that was a few hundred pages, got shrunk down to like the first 100 pages, which was more of just sort of the more description of DA. And all of the content was found here, right? The microsite. So as good as this is, there are some challenges. And so now I'm going to cover the challenges and how we've addressed this. So the looking through process goals, these containers of information, these collections of practices, it's kind of like a little bit like looking through like a keyhole or a peephole in a door, right? Because I'm just looking at this one, and if I'm trying to work with you, Mark, as a business analyst professional, and then I've got your other team member, and that is somebody that's a testing professional. Well, I can come over here and I can go to develop test strategy, but it's hard to keep flipping back and forth. So one of the things years ago that I did was these graphics you can export, and we we'd print them. We'd put them up on walls in team rooms or collaboration rooms at organizations. I think I was one of the first people. I've used MIRO, and it used to be called real-time boards. So putting these graphics on a MIRO board so that they're all sort of laid out end to end. Big benefit there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially since, I mean, I'm going to be a little bit pedantic here, but I think, sometimes the obvious Achilles heel is stands in the room, but nobody addresses it. Everybody wants to work agile, and then they violate the basic principles of agile, which is co-located teams are 60%, 40% more effective than dislocated. But dislocated is not going away. And let's face it, if we want to maintain agility, we're going to have to learn how to work virtually better and better. And MIRO and MIRO boards are the answer to it. So
yeah. So what I just showed in the browser, very significant from an asset perspective, but some challenges. So one of the things that I had done, and then again, this was part of the engagement I had with PMI. I'm going to just zoom out for a minute. So on this MIRO board, right, you can see inception, construction. I'm going to go right back to explore scope. Let me just click here so that I can zoom in. So all these process goals were now replicated on this MIRO board, and everybody can download this for free. The content that I'm covering, I'll show everybody in the MIROverse. PMI has made this available for free.
Oh, so MIRO?
In MIRO.
Oh, wow.
Now, but it goes even further, right? And this is where there was a big investment from PMI, and I can't even tell you how long it took me to do this. All of these are hyperlinked. So if I click on this, what it's going to do is it's going to open the browser, and it's going to take me directly to that. So every single one of the team level practices is hyperlinked on this MIRO board, which you can also download for free. Right? You can see they're all there. And that was the beginning. So now what you've got available is you've got a canvas that teams or PMOs can look at these practices. They can open up that practice and look at a description of what it is, look at the trade-offs of when it may or may not work for you, or what it might take to put that into practice. And then again, a lot of the high impact practices have, additional resources. But this was just the beginning. So
this is amazing.
So these quick starts, which there are 5 of them at the team level, if you click on layers, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on the quick start for.
Now let me. There's an in the wording, in the semantic wording of quick start, it insinuates something, and I'm going to address the elephant in the room here. I think one of the things that professionals always suffer under is the short attention span of people, including executives. So you always have to kind of put things into sexy statements. And I call it shallow simplicity, shallow, sexy simplicity, SSS, right?
Yeah.
But the problem with shallow, sexy simplicity is that it lacks the profundity it takes to really be able to execute it and implement it. And then the counterweight to that would be, I guess, what I would call the overwhelming depth of content, which we have here, right?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that when you say quick starts, for those who might be overwhelmed by this, quick starts are easy shortcuts to say, hey, listen, we're looking at the big picture, but don't get overwhelmed. Here, take a look at a quick start. Is that what the quick start is all about?
That's exactly it. And on these boards, or the board that you can again download for free, there's a fair amount of information which I won't take the time to go through it, but it covers that. And there's also things that I've embedded on these boards that's called a talk track. And when you play like this talk track, it moves the MIRO board around. It has a little video of me up in the corner, but it'll move the board around, and I'm describing the benefit of this approach and how to use it. So let's say on this spectrum up here that you were interested in, like, let's say you're kind of in this space. It's like you have a mostly predictive approach. Yeah, you're using some agile practices, and you're interested in bringing one or more of your teams to using an agile way of working. And again, I'm going to use this example, which we call Agile 1, which is the life cycle of an Agile approach using time boxes, using iterations for like projects or, again, larger quantities of work versus something that's more like continuous delivery. So there's two things that are important to understand about these quick starts. One is it's going to provide you a starting point of what you need to consider. It's not everything. It's the minimum practices of moving to that approach from wherever you might be from a left side of this continuum.
Let me jump in and ask you a question there that's popping up, but that's not a judgment statement as to where you want to go and one is better than the other. This is situative, context-based. In some cases, you're going to need an Agile 1 or an Agile 2. In other cases, an adaptive hybrid 2 would be more appropriate. Is that kind of the statement of this spectrum, or is the idea to drive everybody to the right?
No. So what it is it's going to show you what you're going to need to consider and maybe make some changes to be able to get the benefit of the Agile lifecycle approach. So that's one thing. It's like, instead of just saying, have at it, go figure it out, we're now showing you. And the other thing is showing you and being like, we can't actually do all of that. Okay, well then maybe you need to be looking here or somewhere to the left of that. So let me show you how it works, and then let me
ask you one more question so I don't forget it. So, but this is not to be understood as a semi-equivalent of a maturity model, right?
It's not. It's really more of, this is how we're able to show you how to make where you are today and where you would like to get to, what it potentially is going to take. And it's more about continuous improvement. Again, a lot of the organizations I work with, for a lot of their teams, trying to make a jump all the way over here is too big. And it's not going to be sustainable.
Well, it's also the question of whether it suits the purpose.
Exactly.
And I want to point this out, because in your wording, that was where my question came about. You referred to the two on the right as Agile, but we have to remember hybrid is partially Agile.
It is. And how we describe that in these quick starts is it sort of more predictive than Agile, or is it a little more Agile than predictive? At some point, there's a bit of a changeover. Yeah. There's no right or wrong. And it's about trying to deliver value more effectively. And also, better for the people doing the work, right?
Well, it's a means to an end, but you need to know what means you have. Yeah.
So this is how it works, right? So I'm just going to try to get Inception, which is going to be small, and then I'm going to zoom back in, right? Because there's stuff all the way to the right. So if you were to ask me, so what is the bare minimum of, we're mostly predictive right now, to move to this Agile life cycle, what do we need to do, right? Without giving you a prescription. So what I can do is I can come over here and I can have our, Agile 1 approach based on the DA lifecycle. There's a link to the microsite. And now what you're going to find are indicators.
Those yellow indicators. So that's the minimum requirements, kind of.
So this is it.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
So if you're going to move to an Agile approach and you're going to be implementing requirements in a short time period, like 2 weeks, right? Then what are the practices you're going to need to do that? Well, I'm going to recommend you do user stories. You're probably going to want to use epics. You're going to want to decompose something at a higher level, which would be features, which you might already be doing. You're going to want to have acceptance criteria. And again, there's links to all this to the browser. An explicit list is your non-functional requirements. It's just it's an approach for being able to to capture that and not write it in every single story. Technical stories, and you're going to have a backlog. Now, what I also like to show, this is the minimum you're going to need to consider, right? And so let me get over here to develop test strategy, because that's one of the bigger. I'm going to zoom out for just a minute. Ooh, there is a lot of things within the test strategy. There's only one indicator here, story testing. Because if you're already delivering a digital product, you're probably doing many dimensions of testing already. So what I want to be able to show is that out of the roughly 1,300 practices at the team level, inception, construction, transition, and ongoing, the practices you need to at least consider doing or look for some alternatives to make the transition to the Agile life cycle. There's like 65 of them, or I can't remember the exact count. But when we work with teams, and I'm going to show you, this is an actual example of all of the practices. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here for just a moment. So this is also a way for teams to visualize their way of working, communicate what it is, continue to improve it. We've got 3 indicators that we use, right? So this is the adopting indicator. So you can see that next to Agile 1, there's, adopt, right? There is continue using indicator, like, hey, we already have a glossary, we're already doing business rules, we're already doing, we've already got feature statements. And very, very sparingly, and again, there's this content in the board and in the talk track that I've got, is if you want to explicitly be able to say, our stakeholders are used to seeing these shall statements. We are stopping that practice because we're using stories, right? So again, this is, stop is there, but again, we wouldn't want to use that a lot. So how this looks back over here, and you can see, and I'm going to go back to testing. And this is actually based off of a actual team at a consulting engagement at a large organization. That this isn't something that was just created in the academic lab. I mean, this is derived directly from working with a team, and this is very indicative of working with teams. You can see, they were accessibility testing, database testing, so they're already doing all of that. That's why there's continue next to it. But to move from where they're at,
Just a quick thought that's bouncing around in my head. I want to get it out so that I can clear it again. You're giving us an example of Agile 1, and if I understand correct, Agile 1 and Agile 2 would probably be the more advanced forms. I'm assuming that Hybrid 3 will have a smaller scope, right?
Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out for just a minute, and I'm going to show you. See all the yellow boxes? These are all the little visual indicators of the practices, right? So what I'm going to do is I am going to turn off my Agile 1 Quick Start for a moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Hybrid 1. And let me zoom out. And you can see this is where it's a predictive approach with a handful of Agile practices.
So I just so that I think it's important also for the listener to understand, this is the wealth of what they're getting here. And this is, I guess, the way to overcome this overwhelming depth of content, because you can't see the forest because of the trees, is that your system will say, based on the model that you're using, we'll pick out the trees that are relevant to you.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. So this is a huge change in direction from what we've seen in DA. And this is something, again, my company and me personally, I mean, we've done this with customers for, I don't know, a decade now. So we have a lot of success doing this. And this was something that the work that I did with PMI last year, we were able to actually bring into DA to say, we talk about DA being a approach that supports hybrids. And it is, and it always has been. But people don't understand what that means. So these practices here, and I'm going to just zoom in for a moment. If you're doing a mostly predictive or traditional approach, you can still do daily stand-ups. You can still use a Kanban board.
That's one of my big pet peeves. Long before I knew what Agile was, when I first read my first Agile books, I'm like, this was common sense to me. I've always done Agile.
Yeah.
I mean, you quite honestly, as an operational experienced project manager, if you didn't use certain principles of Agile, you don't know what you're doing. I've never done even the most hardcore predictive projects. I always used Agile methodology. I didn't call it that during execution. But I will say this: I often use predictive models in Agile projects when it comes to initiation. Because I think I prefer predictive models for big picture.
Yeah, so that this really, and right now we've got these 5. These are again. I'm gonna move over here for just a moment to the spectrum that we've got. And there's again a fair amount of information here. Each one of these, I'll zoom in, which will still be a little small, but you can see it gives you a visual indicator that we're looking at Adaptive Hybrid 1, which again just is where we're starting to introduce some practices. Down here, you're seeing a description of the quick start, its benefit and considerations, and recommended practices. So now I'm gonna turn this off for a moment, and I'm gonna go back to Agile 1. So that you can see there's a lot more practices. There's the description. This is the representative example of the life cycle in DA. So these are either going to take you to the browser or they're going to take you to more information that's on that microsite. So what I've tried to do with all of this is make it as actionable as possible. You can, instead of just saying a PDF graphic, these are all clickable links.
I'm sorry that I'm laughing. I have to think back to what you said, Joshua, about this not being a prescriptive model. I'm going to tell you something. There are a bunch of project managers who are jumping up and down in their seats because this is the Jamie Oliver approach to solving some of their problems, which is very prescriptive. But it doesn't limit them. I mean, there is, once you get good at, if you practice cooking long enough, then you understand where the range is where you can change. But this is a great, and quite honestly, and I'm going to say this as well, one of the biggest problems, and I have a big, this is not just a fake background, and I've read all of them. I've read maybe about 55 to 60% of them. One of my big pet peeves with a lot of the literature out there, a lot of them tell you what you need to do, and everybody knows what they're not doing. Okay, I don't think we need another book to tell us to do what we're not doing to begin with. I think as weird as it sounds, I think the big problem that people have is not that they don't understand what they need to do. I think most of the people don't know where to start and how to do it. And I find this, and I don't think it's a contradiction to what you said, but it's a fine line. You're really giving people a toolkit here where they don't have. It's giving them a how.
Yeah, it's definitely giving them a how to start with, and again, determine if that how is the right one for them, or again, it's and let me show you. So I'm gonna turn off my Agile 1. I'm gonna go to Agile 2 for just a moment because this is the continuous delivery life cycle, just to kind of show them. There's lots of things that I've got layered that you can turn on and turn off. It cuts down on visual clutter. Again, there's videos and quick starts and all this stuff all through this of how to make it work. But what I want to show you is something that goes beyond, and I'm gonna let me turn off this so they're not all over the place, right? So this that I've been showing, this Team Agility Canvas, and this content here is downloadable. It's free. This is a companion to the Disciplined Agile Foundations course. So when I designed,
and this is downloadable off the PMI website.
Off of the MIROverse. So let me show you what that is.
Can you send me the link and I'll put it into the the description.
Absolutely. So what MIRO has, so MIRO being a collaboration platform.
I'm familiar with it. Some companies use Mural instead of Miro, but they're the two premier tools for this kind of stuff.
So MIRO has what they call the MIROverse, and that's where people can submit Miro board templates that you can download for free.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to go to and I'll give you the link to this. So I'm in the MIROverse right now. And you can see this is, where we've put the DA stuff for PMI. So this canvas is right here. All you have to do, again, I'm going to give you the links. You click use template. If you have you don't even have to have a paid Miro account. That's the beauty of using the MIROverse. If I gave you a backup version or a template version of this board, you would have to have a paid account. If you use something in the MIROverse, even if you have a free account, you can get to it. So this is all free. Cool. There are two other boards that are in here. There is one that is for Disciplined Agile Essentials. This is a 1-hour introductory course that PMI has on DA. This is the companion Miro board for that. If you're a PMI member, that course is free. If you're not, there's a nominal charge. I can't remember what they charge, but it's not much. And then there is the 8-hour or the 1-day Disciplined Agile Foundations course. So that template is really taking the team agility canvas that I've been taking you through and walking you through a bunch of examples derived from a case story that I created called Big Bank. And it's talking about, again, the complexity of all of these systems like the online banking portal and the app that you can use and the fraud detection platform. And, it's using examples that are based from, again, real stuff to take you through how all of this works. There's an e-learning for that. And then you can also take it from PMI's authorized training partners. I did the e-learning, so you'd be kind of taking it from me if you take
You're leading us into some important questions that I want to get into, which is the whole thing about education and certification. But before we get to that, I think...
And I've got one other thing I want to show you on all this before we move on. So now we're getting into not PMI's content. We're getting into end-to-end flow, which is a product that my consulting company has. And the reason why I want to show this is, for all of you that are watching, if you're interested in this, I can help you from a consulting perspective, but you can also voice your opinion.
And we'll
to PMI.
definitely put your information in the information below as well.
Because I'd love to have PMI have all of this content and then make it available to everyone. So the practices that are here, let me just zoom into this for just a second. And the recommended practices that showed up here, which are all the yellow boxes that you're finding here. So we use a improvement backlog approach to do that. And one of the things that I want to be able to show is that if I were to come down and take a look at something like, let me try to pick one that's going to be, actually, you know what? I did have one that was an example, and that was team norms. So I can open this, and this is right now in MIRO as a MIRO card, and you can see this goes beyond what you're going to find in the DA browser. I've got a brief description. I've got the roles responsible, supporting roles, related practices. I've got, this is what you would need to do to adopt this, some do's and don'ts, and a full description. These cards, if we were using Jira or any other popular work item management tool, we've got this already built where basically this just gets copied into a Jira project or Azure DevOps or what have you. And why I'm showing that is I want to be able to show that, there are a few things that we have found work really well for enabling teams. And I've got the same approach that I'm going to show you at the value stream and enterprise level, in that you might need to do a little bit of training. We call it either micro or nano training, where a lot of these trainings, and I'm going to show you team norms, anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes is all you need to understand what that practice is. Give you an example to walk through, and then do the work of creating an initial draft.
And you have these courses online or what?
I do. So here's what it looks like. So here's a micro training, and I'm just I'll zoom out just so that I don't super scroll. But this is something I can take and explain. So I have this for every single one of these practices. This would give you that 15-minute overview of the types of things from a team norms perspective. We've got adoption templates that are built in MIRO. And each one of these, I'm going to start off with an example of going, this is sort of what we start with. And we typically are going to take a look at things from a process perspective, a behavior perspective, and a working with others, right? So we're creating some of the rules of how we're going to work. And so this gives everybody an example of what it looks like, how we prioritize them, and then some examples of norms that this particular team created. Again, we're not saying copy paste this. Additional notes as far as, where we need to put them and, what we're going to be doing in the future, some related stuff, and, again, notes around the related practices. And then there's a template to get on with doing that work, right? So this also has little mini e-learnings. So this is something that, again, we can provide to like a PMO, and, they're able to have a very repeatable, very consistent approach to doing these practices. Now, the next thing I want to show is, you said visuals, most people are visual learners. I couldn't agree with that more. We see a lot of theory. We're going to get into a little bit of sort of like what PMI's courses used to have in them. They were certification courses. So what I'm going to show you now is part of this end-to-end flow model. This is what we would typically be doing. And again, I won't take you through all this because of time, but in Inception, we've got some of these practices that are part of the quick start. The team way of working, things like norms, definition of done, right? Definition of ready. Again, we're either going to create that the first time we're doing this, or we're going to take a look and possibly refine it, or maybe not have to do anything, right? Increment, value increment, or project over project. Cross-team ways of working, key activities. This, and I'll have to zoom out for a minute to show, this shows you going through Inception. This is there's, on this board alone.
Most people who are even remotely interested in this would be stuck in the mud just conceptually thinking of, where do I start?
Yeah, so this is, it's easier than it seems, right? And typically within an hour or two at a very high level, what I can do is I can show you, if you want to see what a persona looks like or what a persona is. Again, this goes back to that card of, let's take a look at what it is. And then this is an example of what a persona could potentially look like. If you want to see how do we go through brainstorming to go from a feature to stories? Well, so here's the thing. This is like, if I'm a customer and I want to select a product so that I can purchase it, again, these are pretty simplistic examples to not overwhelm people. Yeah, I mean, typically we're going to stand and say, all right, Mark, well, what's the primary flow? Or, the group of people we've got, it's like, hey, we're going to search for a product, probably select from search results, look at an item, determine if we want to add it to cart. And then going from that to something that looks like this with some additional things we might do in the future. And then to be able to show, this is how those look as user stories. This is how we might see some primary and alternative behaviors. So even though it looks like, which there is a lot of content here, it's meant to be more of a reference to say, do you want to see what a story map looks like? And this is a story map. So I should have started off with this. Whether we call this a project or in this case, a value increment, right? This is a value increment canvas, but we could have had a business case here or a project charter here with a whole bunch of examples, these are features that we need to do.
Well, I mean, if you can cluster your individual things into a cohesive thing, then you can call it a project, but this might be part of your ongoing workflow as well, where you have an existing product and you have continuous improvement, which is one of the things that the WOW book actually talks about is, I think a lot of people forget that projects are subservient elements of the product lifecycle, and the product lifecycle is dynamic, and you want to be able to engage your qualities of execution on whatever life cycle that you are in the product. And that might be you might be in Inception, you might be in cash cow phase, you might be wherever, but you can still use some of these things and have an impact.
Yeah. And so what I want to show is, I'm going to go back to the browser for a minute, because this is one of the things that it kind of drives this home a little bit more, and how the board I'm showing you is intended to be used. Because you're not going to just sit down and over the course of an hour or a day go through all the content on that board. That's not the intent.
Well, I think your eyes would fall out.
Exactly. So if I were looking through this and there was a question, it's like persona. All right, so I'm going to click on it. I'm in the browser. It's going to, open up the side window. Detailed descriptions of fictional people who fill roles as stakeholders of the solution being developed. Personas have been around forever, right? I mean, this is just one of the ways that we can.
To kind of tie into what you're saying, I mean, for people who are maybe not familiar with DA, they'll look at this and I know right off the top of my head 10 or 5 different versions of personas. This is something you can pick up. It's kind of by association. You look at the word, you double check whether you're talking about the same thing. This is something that would be quick learning. I think there's other things in here where you're going to have to deep dive a little bit if you're not familiar with it.
And I'll click on one. What's a technical story? Well, it's a simple strategy for capturing quality requirements that are similar to an explicit list. We can write these requirements very similar to a user story. But you might not understand what that is. And this is one of the ones you can see in the upper right-hand corner. There's not a reference here. So what I'm providing in this approach is what we can do is and there's links to this, right? If I went back up so here's what technical stories actually, here's examples, right? So this is an example-based approach to show that to create this functionality, there are some additional technical things that we need to do. And again, we could open this up and take a look at, this is where it would initially have been identified, right? There's no acceptance criteria. And I could then go further over here in the timeline, because this is all just team norms, right? I don't want to overwhelm everyone. These are just examples to go through, right? And I could get all the way over here to my starting point, which is going to be construction. And I could go back to one of those technical stories. And, if I'm opening these, actually, I need to find one a little bit further along. I'll have acceptance criteria and all the content in it. So there's all the high impact practices that the inception phase in Disciplined Agile is going to recommend, and the things that I've tied into with the quick start, so that you don't just have a one-line description. You've got a lot more than that. You understand what it looks like potentially to implement it and what it's going to take. The other thing I'll show as I get into construction is that this gets to where we're telling a story with this. So I can go from the work that was in that value increment canvas to finding a feature, to finding a story that is needed for that feature to be implemented. And we're going to follow that story through its life. It's sort of telling it through the eyes of a requirement that you're implementing. How does that story make its way to where it is prioritized high in the backlog, is pulled into the workflow via a iteration planning event? How does it then go through like the types of tasks that we might see to get that story implemented, validated, right? So it meets our definition of done, and how that it supports that feature. And this is a Kanban board at the feature level, right? So this is a reference model or reference example as I just kind of now scroll backwards to say, if you don't know what a technical story is, or you don't know how technical stories would be implemented, if you don't know how to create a definition of ready or a definition of done, you don't understand what a story map is, you're unsure about how a product owner would, prioritize the backlog. Well, here is an approach to show there's these quantitative things that we need to consider and what's important at this moment in time for the work we're doing. And then, qualitative, the things like getting feedback from our customers, keeping up with competition, improving the customer journey. So this gives you, as I zoom out, I'm now going to go back up here. Oops, a little bit too far zoomed out. I'm going to go back to what we're providing. So we've moved Disciplined Agile from here's the approach to choosing your way of working, to augmenting that with concrete points on this adoption spectrum to say, if you want to get here to the Agile lifecycle, or you want to do continuous delivery Agile, here are the practices you're going to need to consider being able to do to make that work. There's other stuff you have to do, right? I showed in the example, there's things you're probably already doing. And if you can't do that, then let's move a little bit here to the left to a point that you're able to make some improvements, solve some challenges, reduce some of the impediments and friction in your delivery process. All of the examples in these reference models just provide another way to see what those practices are in action. And it's not saying you have to write your stories exactly like this, or you need to create your definition of ready exactly like this. But I can't tell you how often, especially in certification courses, people look at some of this and say, oh, that sounds like a brilliant idea. Can you show me what it looks like? Well, DA doesn't have any examples in it.
Yeah.
Right.
You just zoomed out, and I'd like to zoom out as well and ask you the question. You've shown that Disciplined Agile doesn't just work on a strategic and a tactical level, but it can go very granular on a micro level to the operation, which is a great, a safety ring for people who are looking for a process and a support system. Let me ask you this question from a zoom out perspective.
Yep.
How do you sell this to an organization? Because it's the people that have to sign off on this are not the people who are going to follow this or understand this or appreciate its value.
Excellent question. So rarely would I show anywhere near this level of depth, right? I mean, because that's not what people at the decision making typically want to see or should be seeing, because it would take a lot of time for them to understand it. So I'm going to bring it back up to a higher level and say it's starting with what are the things you're trying to see from an improvement perspective, and then at least being able to say, yeah, you're interested in team level agile. Great. I might show the ways of working spectrum and give a high level overview of why moving to agile is not easy. You know, you might have people that have told you in the past, sure, take this training and everybody's going to be able to get there. That's not reality.
They're looking for the quick Band-Aid approach.
Yeah. The other thing is that I'm typically going to maybe get into a little bit of this context that I've been showing at the team level agile, where I would normally focus, especially for the engagements that I've worked on now for the past many years, is looking at things as I go back to this level. This level. And talking more about, again, this end-to-end flow and how the things that are here in portfolio and product management are where some of the biggest opportunities we're going to see in the organization. Because if I asked, how long does it take to go from idea to getting something released? This span of time here is normally one of the longest, right? And I'll show you an example, and all of you viewing, in just a moment, that is how we would sort of go about implementing this. But what I do want to show is this, and this is beyond what's in Disciplined Agile right now, but it also is important to understand, because if you're looking at content in the DA browser and you're looking at things sort of in that value stream area. So DA, like a lot of Agile approaches, have had more of what I'd consider a single product perspective. And DA's got a lot of guidance for this, which is valuable. So if you have a product that a single team of 8 to 10 or 12, whatever that is, that can maintain the enhancements, maybe not the maintenance, but the enhancements for that product, then it's pretty straightforward. But what happens when you've got a really big product and you've got 5 teams, and now we're talking about things like we see in these scaled approaches, right? So then you might have a chief product owner, because now you've got 5 teams and each team's got a product owner, and you need somebody to be that chief that can make decisions for the whole product. So a lot of what you find in DA is single product focused, and again, valuable. When we look at things though from a value stream management perspective, it's rare we're going to have a team that's going to make an update to a product and there's not going to be some other work that needs to be done, right? And so what I've got in this, and again, this is beyond what you're going to find in DA. So you can either, work with me. I'm happy to help with this, or again, make the case to PMI, because it'd be great to have this in there. The first thing I'm going to pull up is this. So what we have is we have process goals that are associated with the discovery workflow, which is product management. We've got investment decisions, which is in portfolio management. We've got enterprise agility. And each one of these, along intake management, as well as moving to a value delivery management office. A lot of PMOs are taking a look at how project professionals, who are, I think, one of the most ideal roles to become value delivery managers or value delivery enablers. So there are all of these process goals that are associated with value stream management and enterprise agility. What I also have with these is I have the exact same. I've got, quick starts. And if I were to go through and just open up a quick start.
Just so from a different perspective of what Disciplined Agile has to, on a tactical or on a strategic level, can offer, you have the same quick starts for executives and for business unit leaders.
Yes. Yeah. And this is where, and I wanted to show the team agile stuff just so that, because that stuff is available through PMI right now. Again, not the reference models from the other things, but that's there. We're introducing some of this content in the Disciplined Agile leadership course that was released at the end of last year. So it's about enterprise agility for value delivery. So I did include content on these quick starts. And again, PMI may bring these into the publicly available DA stuff in the future, which I'd like to see. But what I wanted to show is that these, what I would consider something that is close to like the agile life cycle at the team level, is what I have here, value stream flow. And this is where we're really looking at things with value stream management practices that really can uncork a lot of inefficiency in organizations. But sometimes that's a little bit too difficult. Like I showed this view to a CIO and a CTO of an organization that I started with about 18 months ago. And they were both in agreement, and you know, they're direct reports. And they were, as I got through an understanding of this, they're like, this would be what we need. We are not empowered to make that. And the CIO basically made me move, and he said, right about here, which is kind of where this hybrid flow is at, he said, this is my area of responsibility, and I can make changes of how, from an IT perspective in this organization, we're going to deliver what comes to us. I can't make changes up here without buy-in and a lot of others. So we started here. We started with what I would consider to be a hybrid approach, where some of these investment decisions
have already been made. Is that why the numbering is counterintuitively from right to left, and not the other way around?
It starts,
you have to
exactly.
You have to start with the manageable and influential and influenceable denominator and work your way up the pyramid.
Yeah, and if I were to, and I'm going to do the same thing here for just a minute, I'm going to turn off this and I'm going to turn on one, and you can see that there are a lot less practices that are highlighted here, right? So, and why this is important is we have to recognize that with a lot of these agile approaches and some of the big scaled approaches, it's like, well, you got organizational changes, you've got all this stuff you got to do, which may or may not actually happen. This approach is saying, look, let's see where you're at and what is pragmatic as a thing that we're able to do. And it might be here, or it might be somewhere here. This is where we're getting into value stream flow. The next one above this, VSM4, is what's considered value network flow, where we have intersecting value streams. It's like commercial banking and individual banking, and there's dependencies and stuff that needs to happen. And then there's VSM5, which is enterprise flow, and that's where we've got not just IT, it's supporting areas and operational. I mean, that truly is end-to-end flow, and
you've got a workflow for people who sell this then as well, don't you?
Yes. So, but what I do want to show in this is if I were to, and I'm going to go back to, I like to use, I am going to use VSM3 because that's a little more comprehensive. So what I did want to show is this is the other thing, in that the PMI in one of the certification courses, which I know we need to get to some discussion on that.
Can you make it a little bit bigger?
Yeah, I'll zoom in just a moment. What we saw in the DA-VSC course, which was, I think, the best DA certification course that has been, was to create an improvement backlog. So it said, make some selections around the practices you're going to do. Use a backlog to manage it. That's it, right? So, in doing that, and I'm gonna get down to, let's see, I'll go to, I'll use the value increment strategy. So one thing I wanted to show is that what I would normally do working with an organization is all of these MIRO boards and all these things, like at the team level, every team gets a copy of what I was showing. We're going to visualize their way of working. We're going to work to make some selections, pick the quick start that's the right fit for us, and then, and again, tailor it from there, right? Similarly, from a to the left now we're in the more the strategic side. And so what's I think also important is I can open this. Now this I'm showing now the actual integration with Jira. Again, we can do this with any work item management tool. What I've got that's a little bit different than what we found, again, in the DA browser is I've got a much more comprehensive description in these. I've got a difference in the trade-offs. I've got when to not use this or keep it highly adaptive, as well as when to use it. And if I were to open up in Jira, right, this is a way to take all of the content I'm showing in those process goals, in the quick starts, and it's already built into Jira, right? Because this takes a lot of time. Like you don't want somebody in a PMO or an Agile Center of Excellence to have to go through and create all of this. This stuff's already created. Like this is kind of
this
where...
will get you stuck in the mud quicker than you can say ABC, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's one thing I wanted to show is that if I were to, let me go ahead and get to, end-to-end flow improvements, like all of the things that I was showing in those process goals that are associated with quick starts, planning poker, increments, things, again, definition of ready at the value stream level, measurable outcomes, all this stuff. So now we've got a approach already that's dynamic and flexible. It's like, oh, you want to adopt the value increment? Let's go ahead and move that over, right? So we have visibility from an adoption perspective. Now, the other thing as I open this up now that I'm in Jira is most organizations are going to benefit also from having content that goes beyond what you're finding in like the DA browser, right? So I'm going to click on this. This is going to open up a example page that we would find in Confluence, right? Actually, I mean, I could just go. So Confluence is, again, another one of the tools in that last suite, whether it's Confluence or, Notion or any of these other, ways, this is about your process and your ways of working. And so again, brief description, there's a template, there's examples, there's role responsible supporting roles, there's the description, life cycle of a value increment, right? And so what I wanted to be able to show is that all of these practices, all of these pages, I'll just go into like quick start number 3, we've already got built, strategic objectives at the value stream level. And there's examples for all of this. Definition of ready at the value stream level. Right. Key characteristics of this practice, tips, examples. Right. And this is a continuous example. That's the other thing that's important is we've built all of this to be used in 2 ways. One way is that we are using this big bank, which is a continuous set of examples at the portfolio and enterprise level that goes all the way down to the team level. And the other thing is that the reference model that I showed in some of these pages and examples, what we end up doing is we replace our generic examples with organizational content. So if we're working with the first couple of teams that are going to adopt sort of a newer way of working, and we're also going to see that we're maybe adopting this value increment strategy, we're going to be taking what they're doing and replacing content so that it's organizational content. And that is where things become very actionable and people really understand. So this content probably is there's probably more content in all of this than there is actionable content that we see in Disciplined Agile.
Yeah. Let me ask you a typical CEO question. What is time to implementation and what would something like this cost? I'm gonna use a point of reference. They used to have this heuristic with Six Sigma that said medium to large size company under $1 million, forget it.
So first, let me say I've worked with a number of fintech companies. One fintech company that was very, very well funded, but less than 100 people. I've worked with big global companies that have thousands of employees all over the world, right? So I mean, I'm just trying to show. And so from a time perspective, it depends on what the organization is trying to do. Right. It might be to start making some improvements at the team level and also be taking a look at sort of that portfolio.
You can do it in layers. Okay.
Absolutely. And that's what it should be, right? And so what I haven't shown yet, and I'll again, I know we're getting on in time, but I started to show some of the diagnostics that we've probably got a dozen, maybe a little bit more of these visual diagnostics to understand where the pain points are at, identifying where the constraint is at. How do we identify their value streams and do some value stream mapping? Only if it makes sense. Right. So again, I'm going to go back to saying where I've got VSM1, VSM2, VSM3. It's if we need to be at VSM1, it's going to be taking a look at how can we make improvements based on how work is coming to you, maybe within an IT organization, within a big company, to be better at execution. Right. It might be moving upstream a little bit more and saying, okay, you want to make a change in how you're actually making those investment decisions. What projects are getting stood up and approved and funded, right? So it's very flexible all the way through that. And it might not be VSM1 or VSM3. It might be a little bit of in between there.
But you said something, you kind of gave me an indirect answer. So it's not based on size. So a company with 100 employees could use this sensibly and effectively. But you did mention that they were well-funded. Can a company with 100 employees that's not as well-funded as a fintech company afford this?
Yeah. So how this is like what I've been showing that is non-PMI's Disciplined Agile content. There's two primary ways that we offer this, right? One is just a flat out, if you want to acquire a little or all of this stuff, which is we've got thousands and thousands of hours developing it, so you don't have to do that. We sell it outright with some enablement to show you how to use it. So if you've got a PMO or you've got an Agile Center of Excellence, we can get you stood up and get you going, and you can acquire it. I won't give specific numbers, but it is a lot less expensive than you would expect.
So it's affordable for a small to medium-sized enterprise as well?
It's affordable, I would say, for just about any organization. The other approach is that a lot of the consulting work we do, this is what we bring, our rates are going to be very commensurate with other, boutique consulting companies that are experts in this space. But, and I'll make this offer right now because I've wrapped up some of my current PMI work that has taken a lot of my time over the past, year. Anyone out there that would like to use this approach and this content, I will charge you my standard rate, and I'll use all of this content for free. As long as
please use the discount code. No.
As long as you'll provide feedback to the DA team, good, bad, whatever it is. And again, it doesn't need to be formal, a case study, anything like that. But what I am looking is to try to raise awareness within PMI of where DA, this next generation of DA that we've embarked on, can continue to go. That makes it more outcome-based, makes it even more actionable than it is. So I'll throw that out there.
That's a great answer. And well, like I said, we'll put all your information down in below as a link. You kicked off a word that's important, and that's the subject matter of awareness. This is a lot of amazing work, and I'm a big fan of the adage, do good things and talk about it. Not enough people know about this. How come? What is PMI going to do in the near future to change that? I mean, I'm hoping that we're contributing with this podcast, but I'm not employed by PMI either. So
yeah, I'll go ahead and stop my screen share for a minute just so we can get back to kind of maybe a bit of discussion. I can go back and show anything else. I've got. We'd probably need 5 more of these.
We probably need a couple more of these
to cover the content. So PMI, I think, executed very well last year on a roadmap that was a change in direction. So let's talk a little bit also on the future of where DA is going, but kind of where we're at right now. PMI, when they acquired Disciplined Agile, they rolled out a set of certification courses. And then those courses had one, I would say, significant sort of evolution. And there were 4 courses that you could be certified in, right? So there was the DASM, the Disciplined Agile Scrum Master, Senior Scrum Master, Disciplined Agile Coach, and Value Stream Consultant. The challenge with certification courses is that it is a lot of theory, and it's a lot of showing you things in slides that prepare you. I mean, yeah, you understand the content and the value and so forth, but it's also preparing you to to challenge an exam, right? That's how a lot of certification courses work. And so, there's good and there's maybe not so good that comes along with that.
I feel like I know exactly what this is an ongoing subject with all valuable content. And this is what I tell people, regardless if it's for the PMP, preparing for the PMP is not learning the PMP, the PMBOK. It's memorizing, it's rote memory, it's not cognitive, right? At least not as much. The focus is more on volume than it is on actually application, which it sometimes a drawback, yeah.
Yeah, so some changes, right, came about, and across PMI, DA was included in that, and so the DA certification courses were sunset. So PMI's direction, right, has been that they're moving to what they consider the gold standard, like the PMP or the CAPM, right, where it's a proctored exam. It's it's the way that the exam and the questions and the courses are designed are all very, very specific and very robust. So courses that we had like in DA were sunset. And everybody, there was a lot of backlash with, they're killing DA and, oh my gosh, my certification, there's nothing going forward. But what it did, which was extremely positive in at least my perspective, is that it enabled the new courses that we designed and built last year to be more focused on enabling organizations to put something into action and get an outcome. A lot of what I've covered, both at the team level, and again, I haven't been able to show some of the things that are at the Disciplined Agile Leadership, the Enterprise Agility course, is that they're example-based, and there are things you leave with. You leave with good quality examples. You leave with tools. You leave with MIRO boards that you're able to use immediately. So it's not anymore about focusing on getting you, again, rote memory and understanding how to pass
getting
an
another
exam.
merit badge, yeah.
And the focus for DA is back to what it was prior to PMI's acquisition, which was more of a B2B perspective. And people say, well, what does that mean? Well, B2C in the PMI space is to the consumer. It's to an individual that's going to take a course, challenge an exam, get recognized for their knowledge. B2B means we're working with organizations to, ideally to deliver the training so that we're not training an individual from this company, an individual from that company in a public environment. What we're doing is we're saying, okay, Mark, so you're bringing us in and we want to do the Disciplined Agile Foundations course, and we're going to train your PMO members, or we're going to take your team leads, or we're going to take a team through that training to leave them with a solid approach to being able to, again, determine what their evolution of the way of working is going to look like. Again, using a quick start, or again, maybe it's again a little bit more hybrid than they are today. And that, to me, has been one of the best things that we've seen within DA. But not a lot of people know about it, right? There's not a lot of communication and marketing from a DA perspective, like a lot of things. I mean, PMI is just such a large organization with a lot of offerings that it's kind of like the best kept secret in the Agile, in the Team Agile, the Enterprise Agile, and definitely in the value stream management perspective. One thing I didn't mention in the opening is I was a board member for a few years at the Value Stream Management Consortium, which has now become Flowtopia. That was originally stood up by a lot of the significant tool organizations, like Atlassian was Planview, Atlassian, a lot of the big companies. So I've had the opportunity to see and get insight from a lot of people that are interacting with organizations all across the world for value stream management from digital practices. And I can say that what we're now putting into DA, or building upon what was there, is some of the best content to make portfolio management and product management, again, those investment decision space, out of anything else that I think is available in the industry. It's just,
I think
no one knows about it.
The way you've explained it, the B2B makes absolute sense. But from an emotional marketing perspective, and my original background is in marketing, there is a certain loss because if you look at the original, Six Sigma approach, they kind of used a dual approach. They had a B2B approach, but they didn't leave out the B2C because they understood that they needed angels or advocates or evangelists. That's the only counter that I might offer because I think it's important in the sense of creating disciples. And I think a lot of the people who took the Disciplined Agile certification see themselves as advocates and disciples and evangelists for your topic. I think that might be something that on the back end, when you move forward, you might consider some kind of, merit badge or whatever it might be to designate those people. Because going forward, like I said, the multiplication effect, people rotate from job to job and being knowledgeable in DA, having it on your CV is great, but having some kind of illustrious stamp of approval for the next employer might be an interesting factor from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, yes, and there is recognition when you take either the Disciplined Agile Foundations course, which again is Team Agility, or Disciplined Agile Leadership. Now, one of the other challenges that we saw that the pre-PMI acquisition of DA that were DA partners with the Disciplined Agile Consortium, and we could deliver the training that the consortium had, was that when PMI acquired DA, those Disciplined Agile partners sort of came along, right? And so the time period was when the Registered Education Program, the REP program, was transitioning to the Authorized Training Partner program, the ATP program. And when ATP transition happened, all of the DA partners needed to become an Authorized Training Partner. And so that began to introduce, at least in my opinion, some challenges, because what happened is pre-acquisition, you really needed to be an expert in DA. There were not a lot of consulting partners, and definitely not a lot of people that could deliver training, because you needed to actually have used DA in practice. When it went to the ATP program, unfortunately what happened was, if you were a training partner, pretty much anybody that was an instructor you could deem suitable for delivery.
Oh, you think that the transition, because for me, it was just a change of letters.
Yeah. So what happened is that let's say you had somebody that was teaching PMP and ACP. They were kind of like a professional and, trainer, right? And so, for those of you that don't know, when you're an instructor, you've got PowerPoints, and the PowerPoints have speaker notes, and, so sometimes, you might just see people that don't have a lot of expertise as an instructor in the subject matter, but, they know the slides and they can read speaker notes. So they can kind of train anything.
They're kind of like news commentators.
Kind of, right? And so what happened is we saw a significant jump in people that were offering the DA courses. And I know myself, I had a number of people that would come through and take training from me. And, based on interacting with them in the course, I knew that they had maybe no experience with Agile ways of working. And now they're teaching DA courses. So that became a challenge, as well as that and it was popular, right? DA, the PMI has got a huge membership base, and so here's this new shiny thing, and so there were a lot of DA courses being delivered, and unfortunately, that meant all of a sudden everybody jumped on delivering courses, and I think it kind of hurt the credibility of DA, because people would take some of those courses from an inexperienced instructor, or an instructor that didn't maybe have the experience and depth of knowledge needed to answer questions from a practical application perspective.
Well, I still think to counter that, I think one of the countermeasures should have been to maybe have a different selection process for who's allowed to teach DA.
Correct.
But it doesn't necessarily negate the potential value of creating a handful of senior experts that advocate for you.
No, and I'm sorry, and I got off on a tangent there. The primary goal for this next gen DA was more B2B stuff, but ATPs can deliver this in a public environment, and again, like any other course. My company is no longer an ATP. There's no conflict of interest because of all the work that I do with PMI and working with DA, right? So we stopped being an ATP. I will be delivering both the DA Foundations course and the leadership course through PM training.
So, but that brings me to the next question. For those, some people say, "Okay, you guys are talking too much. Tell me, I want to learn something. What education deliveries are out there for somebody who's interested, and who teaches them?"
Yeah. Okay, so there's 3 courses currently available. There's the Disciplined Agile Essentials. That's a 1-hour course. It's free to PMI members. I mentioned, I think it's a nominal, I don't know, $10, $25. I can't remember exactly how much if you're not. That gives you an overview of DA. It gives you an overview of the team level stuff and then the value stream stuff. Disciplined Agile Foundations is the team agility course. You can take that through the Authorized Training Partner Network. Or that is,
but that's not offered by PMI.
It's not, but it is offered through PMI training. So PMI, you can, and for those deliveries, at least currently, more than likely, I would be the one delivering them.
Okay. Good. And there's a third one you mentioned?
There's the third one, which is the Disciplined Agile Leadership course that is enterprise delivery for value delivery. So that is a foundations course for leadership, for project professionals, for portfolio managers, program managers, product managers, product owners, to understand value stream management with respect to digital products. It is a solid foundation, and that was a big change from the DAVSC course. This is a 1-day course. It has a different target audience. It has a different value proposition. Again, it's example based.
No, I mean, just quite honestly, the title is good enough that it just by association we can figure out what that focus is on.
And then for all of this, to move beyond just the introduction, which is what the courses are providing, by all means, reach out to me. I mean, we have quite a coverage. Both, again, I showed a little bit of the team level, and that was just sort of the tip of what we've got. And then when we're talking about the strategic side, the training and the enablement content we've got, we have lots of offerings.
I've got to say, and maybe I'm a little bit of an indicator for something for our listeners. I've been thrilled with our conversation. It's been very insightful. You had a great structure. I've seen a lot of things that have opened my eyes. I'm a little bit overwhelmed, which is normal. Sometimes you just have to let things sit. And I'll definitely, one of the things I will do is, and this is kind of my approach to the PM Cowboy podcast, I've kind of created different categories of knowledge that on a regular basis I follow up on. I'm going to definitely, once this settles and I've reviewed it and broken it down into its elements and kind of marketed it as best I can, I'm going to in the back of my head kind of work on what would perhaps be a next stage follow-up, maybe where we narrow down onto a particular application. And if you're interested on your side, please think also on your side. I would love to maybe in a certain interval have you on as a regular guest where we follow up on things.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And some of the things we could consider doing is I can show you both team level and then sort of organizational level, an example of like the flow of how it over a couple of months working with the executive leadership to see again how
I think that would be a great follow up. So let's offline let's brainstorm on that. I've got a couple quick fire questions that are and I'm famous. You know what a DAO is, right? Dumbest assumed user. That's me. But I asked the question that less and safe. Any crossover to them?
Well, there is a lot of content in DA and specifically the value stream area that if you're already using one of those approaches and you're not seeing the results that maybe you thought you were going to get or hoped you were going to get, there are a lot of things that, as I started to sort of show some of the new process goals that have practices and techniques you can absolutely adopt. I'm working with an organization that went down I won't say which one, but it went down one of those approaches. And
I want to be more blunt. It's like when I, as a consultant, have to take over a former McKinsey project. You have to clean up the mess. I said it, whatever. But to put it clearly, if a company is using less or safe, there's no integration problem, but it's not a requirement for this in any form or fashion.
Correct.
Okay. Next question, which I think is, and you've kind of alluded to it. I've got a whole segment over here on books that I'm halfway through. I'm a big fan of lean. Because I think lean is a great crossover, and it's kind of and then it's also the question, what does lean cover? Is lean its own discipline, or is it a change discipline, or is it an innovation discipline? It's kind of all over the place. But it's a great thing, and I think it is. I often say it's the twin brother or twin sister of what project management, and I think it kind of ties into your initial concept of having a big picture end-to-end concept. All right?
Yeah.
Do you see change management and lean as an essential part of disciplined agile and a good and is it sufficiently integrated? Because I think one of the big things that companies are facing from an overhead perspective, they might have a change department, they might have a lean department, they might have an OPEX, it's the new thing, operational excellence, right?
Yep.
And they'll all be on the same floor with the PMO, and they're all wondering, we're doing a similar thing, we're not doing the same thing, but we're doing some. Do you see? Maybe this is a final pitch for Disciplined Agile. Do you see Disciplined Agile as a potential bridge between these individual disciplines so that you have a more integrated approach?
Yeah, I absolutely do. Yeah, and that's what you'll find in some of the marketing stuff, and based on what was brought into DA from a value stream management perspective, is it supports Agile, it supports Lean, it's got things that are in connection with the theory of constraints, right? Finding where the constraint is. So it really blends all of that into a one place to go.
Joshua, I've had an absolute blast. I almost feel guilty cutting you off, but we're doing good for time. We've stretched it. I think this, if we let it sit where it is, I think we have a good initial start into a potential maybe future journey into some more details. Anything else you want to share with any highlights of what you've got planned in the next month or 2026?
So what I'd really like to wrap up with is just to sort of build upon one of the questions you asked, and then put sort of an ask out there of anyone that's watching this, is that DA has always struggled with awareness, right? It's just not, I can't say it's one particular thing, but it has. And so when people take a DA, previously when people take a DA course from, again, with a good experience, right? It's like they're kind of hooked. It's like, wow, like this is really good. And that's
the next question is, why doesn't anybody know about this?
Yes, right? And so my ask to all of you is that, if anything I've shown, or if you're watching this because you've been exposed to DA, then reach out to PMI, right? Ask for more. Right, they are trying to balance all the things that they have available for their members, and if you're asking, post on LinkedIn, tag the leadership team members from PMI, and let them know that you see value in DA, you want more, or you want something that again helps to raise awareness as well as helps to continue furthering what's there. Are
you guys doing the conference and PMI chapter circuit?
So I speak at a lot of the PMI chapters. I'm very fortunate that, a lot of them reach out to me and ask. So I do a fair amount of speaking. Curtis Hibbs and I are trying to do a little bit more this year. Again, Curtis is a PMI employee. He's, one of their Agile thought leaders. So I'm hoping that, Curtis and I will also do a bit more speaking this year. Again, to help raise awareness and also answer questions and so forth.
Yeah, I think if I were to post any of the big global PMI events, I know that PMI Chapter Austria, which is one of the chapters I was fortunate enough to found and manage for quite some time, is in excellent management hands right now, and they have regular events in there, and they're fairly active as they were in the past. Also, there's 2 symposiums, one in Dubai, that's taking place right now in January, that would be an interesting place to position it, because you have organizations.
Yeah, I spoke there on the DA content. I think it was 3 years ago. Actually, Scott did a presentation at the same time, so we were there and got to do. Yeah, so I've spoken there on DA.
And there's another one that's taking place in May in Saudi. And both those markets are incredibly forward thinking and open for innovation. So
I'll look into that, or if anybody from any of that conference or any other ones that has interest. I love speaking at conferences. I like speaking any opportunity I get on DA. So if anyone is out there and is looking for a speaker on DA, contact me. I'm happy to see how I can make it happen.
Well, you've got 2 thumbs up from me. Joshua, I'll call you Scott now. Joshua, thank you so much for your time. It's been a revelation. It's been fun. It's been highly informative, and I look forward to future talks.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's been great being here.
Thanks a lot. All the best.